we continue our journey through the book of Jasher. After the trials of the wilderness, Israel did not arrive at a grand city or a sheltering oasis. Instead, their path led them to a mountain, a formidable peak where the earth seemed to stretch up to touch the heavens. This was Sinai. The book of Jasher records that Israel arrived here, humbled by their long journey, shaped by profound hunger, and marked by the harsh lessons of survival. They had learned the discipline of following. Now they would learn the art of listening. The mountain loomed before them, dark, silent, and waiting. Moses ascended, not as a conqueror planting a flag, but as a humble servant called upward into the divine presence. The book of Jasher emphasizes the significant distance between God and the people at this early stage. Israel had been freed from their chains, but they were not yet prepared for the closeness, the intimacy of a relationship with their Creator. So boundaries were set. Lines were drawn in the sand at the foot of the mountain. Holiness, they were learning, required order and reverence. Then the mountain shook. The ground trembled beneath their feet as deep, rumbling thunder rolled across the plains. Jagged forks of lightning cut through the sky, illuminating the darkness. A crown of fire blazed upon the peak, a beacon of raw, untamed power. Amidst this awesome display, a single trumpet blast sounded, growing louder and more intense with every breath they took. The book of Jasher vividly describes the people's reaction. They trembled. This was not the silent, carved god of Egypt's pantheon. This was a living, breathing, all-powerful presence. And then God descended. Not quietly, not subtly, but visibly, audibly, and with overwhelming power. Smoke billowed from the mountain, as if from a colossal furnace. The very ground quaked, and the people instinctively fell back. A profound fear seized them. It wasn't the fear of punishment or retribution, but the overwhelming fear of proximity. God was near, terrifyingly near, and they felt utterly unprepared for such an encounter. In this critical moment, Moses stood as a bridge between the divine and the mortal. He was the mediator, the voice, the connection between a holy God and a fearful people. The book of Jasher makes it clear that Sinai was not merely a place for receiving laws. It was a place of divine revelation. God was not only commanding obedience, He was revealing His very nature, His power, His holiness, His majesty. The experience was too much for the people. Overcome with awe and terror, they begged Moses to be their intermediary. "Let not God speak to us," they pleaded, "lest we die." For them, at that moment, distance felt far safer than intimacy. As we continue our journey through the book of Jasher, we find ourselves at the foot of a mountain ablaze with divine fire. Below, the nation of Israel waits, a sea of anxious faces turned upward. And then, from the heart of the inferno, God speaks. The book of Jasher records that the voice thundering from Sinai was not a chaotic roar of power. It was deliberate, articulate. Each word carried immense weight, not as a restriction, but as the very foundation of a new covenant. The first words were not a command, but a declaration of relationship. "I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt." Think about that sequence. Before any command, there was a reminder of their shared history. Before God asked for obedience, He affirmed the relationship He had already established. Jasher emphasizes this order with great care. God did not introduce Himself primarily as a lawgiver, but as their deliverer. What was about to follow was not a new form of bondage. It was the framework for their identity as a free people. Then came the words that would shape a nation and influence the world for millennia. You shall have no other gods before me. The command was clear, cutting through the polytheistic haze of the ancient world. Israel's allegiance was to be singular, their worship undivided. This wasn't about a jealous deity demanding exclusivity. It was about protecting them from the destructive and empty promises of idols. Next, you shall not make for yourself a carved image. This went deeper than just forbidding statues of stone or wood. It was a prohibition against reducing the infinite, invisible Creator into a finite, controllable object. An idol gives humanity power over its God. The God of Israel was to be known, not managed. He is the one who shapes his people, not the other way around. Then the instruction to protect the sanctity of his name. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. This is far more than just a rule against casual cursing. It's about how you represent God in the world. To carry his name meant to live in a way that brought honor, not disgrace, to it. It was a call to live with integrity, where one's words and actions reflected the character of the one they served. From there, the rhythm of life itself was sanctified. A day was to be set apart, a time for rest and remembrance. The Sabbath was not a burden, but a gift, a weekly reminder that their value was not in their productivity, but in their relationship with their Creator. It was a revolutionary concept in a world built on endless labor and servitude. It declared that even time itself belongs to God. The commands then turned from their relationship with God to their relationships with each other, starting with the foundational unit of society, the family. Honor your father and your mother. This was about more than simple obedience from a child. It was about creating a culture of respect that held society together across generations, ensuring that wisdom was passed down and the elderly were cared for. You shall not murder. Life created in God's image was declared sacred. This simple, powerful prohibition established the fundamental right to exist, protecting the vulnerable and holding the community accountable for preserving life. It drew a line in the sand, separating them from the brutal cultures that surrounded them where life was often cheap. You shall not commit adultery. This protected the covenant of marriage, the bedrock of family and societal stability. Faithfulness was not just a personal virtue, but a communal necessity. It guarded the heart of the family against betrayal and fragmentation, ensuring a secure environment for children to thrive. You shall not steal. This command secured the right to property, creating a foundation for economic justice and trust. It meant that the fruits of a person's labor were protected, fostering a society where people could build and prosper without the constant fear of being exploited or having their livelihood taken from them. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Truth was enshrined as a pillar of the community. Justice, relationships, and societal trust all depend on honesty. This command protected a person's reputation and ensured that legal proceedings would be fair, not corrupted by lies and slander. Finally, the commands turned inward to the unseen world of the human heart. You shall not covet. This was perhaps the most radical command of all. It addressed the very root of sin, desire. God wasn't just concerned with outward actions, but with the internal attitudes that lead to them. By forbidding envy and wrongful desire, he was teaching his people to find contentment and to celebrate the blessings of others rather than craving them for themselves. The words echoed through the camp, reverberating in the air and in the hearts of the people. Each command drew a boundary. But as Jasher helps us understand, these were not walls to imprison them. They were fences to preserve their freedom, protecting their relationship with God and with one another from the chaos and brokenness they had left behind in Egypt. As the voice of God concluded, the people trembled. The fire on the mountain cracked overhead, the earth shook beneath their feet, and the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder. The raw, unfiltered presence of holiness was overwhelming. Fear began to eclipse their understanding. The book of Jasher records that the people of Israel as a whole took a step back. The very nearness of God that they had longed for now felt unbearable. His perfect holiness only served to magnify their own imperfections. Their own distance from him, their awe curdled into terror. They turned to Moses, their faces pale with fright, and they begged him to be their intermediary. "You speak to us, and we will listen," they pleaded. "But do not let God speak to us directly, or we will die." In that moment a subtle but significant shift occurred. Fear replaced their spiritual hunger. A desire for distance replaced the pursuit of intimacy. They opted for a representative instead of a direct relationship. Moses, seeing their terror, sought to reassure them. "Do not be afraid," he told them. He explained the purpose behind this awesome display. God has come to test you, so that the fear of him will be with you to keep you from sinning. Jasher's account highlights this critical paradox. There is a fear that protects, not a terror that destroys. It is a profound reverence, an awe that leads to life by keeping one on the right path. It's the kind of healthy fear that keeps you from stepping off a cliff, not the kind that paralyzes you in your home. It was meant to be a guiding principle, a constant awareness of God's presence and standards. Yet, despite Moses' reassurance, the people remained far off, keeping their distance from the holy mountain. Their experience had rattled them to the core. They were not ready for such unfiltered communion. So while the people stood back in the safety of the distance they had chosen, Moses drew near. He alone walked forward, ascending the mountain and disappearing into the thick, swirling darkness where God was. And here we pause. In the next part of our story, we will see how this distance plays out. While Moses communes with God in the darkness, the people below will be tested by his absence. Their patience will wear thin, and their loyalty will be challenged. They will face a critical choice: to wait in faith for the leader who has entered the cloud, or to turn back to the familiar, tangible gods they once knew. The seeds of rebellion are sown in the soil of fear. We continue our journey through the book of Jasher, returning to the foot of Mount Sinai. Moses remained on the mountain, enveloped in the divine presence, but down below, a different kind of fire was stirring. The fire of Sinai still burned on the peak, a constant, visible reminder of God's power. Yet as time stretched on, the waiting began to test the very soul of the people. 40 days is a long time to wait, especially when the silence feels louder than the thunder that preceded it. The book of Jasher vividly describes how days bled into weeks, and a creeping uncertainty filled the camp. The God who had just spoken with such earth-shattering power now felt distant, almost abstract. And the mediator, Moses, the man who had ascended into that divine fire on their behalf, had not returned. Fear began to morph, shedding its skin of terror and taking on a new, more insidious form: impatience. The people, restless and anxious, gathered before Aaron. Their demand was startling in its directness: "Make us a God who will go before us." It's crucial to understand their mindset, as detailed in Jasher. They weren't necessarily denying the Lord who had delivered them from Egypt. Instead, they were craving a tangible, visible representation of divine power. They wanted a God they could see, something to rally around, something that felt more immediate than the unseen presence on the mountaintop. They had grown accustomed to the idols of Egypt, to gods carved from wood and stone. The abstract nature of their new faith was a strain. Jasher is clear on this point. Impatience always seeks substitutes. When faith in the unseen wavers, people rush to create something they can control. And so the call went out. Gold was collected, earrings, jewelry, the very spoils of their liberation from Egypt. A fire was kindled, not the divine fire of the mountain, but a man-made fire in the valley. And from this fire a golden calf emerged, a molten image shaped by human hands, tragically reflecting the familiar idolatry they had just left behind. A celebration was declared. Tomorrow is a feast to the Lord, they proclaimed, attempting to blend their old ways with their new covenant. They danced, they sang, they made offerings. They created a spectacle of worship, a festival of their own design. But the true presence was absent. While the people reveled around their golden idol, a different conversation was happening on the mountain. God spoke to Moses, his words sharp and direct. "Go down, for your people, whom you brought out of Egypt, have corrupted themselves. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them." Imagine the weight of those words on Moses. He descended from the mountain, his arms heavy with the 2 tablets of the testimony, stone slabs inscribed by the very finger of God. As he neared the camp, the sounds of celebration reached him. But it wasn't the sound of a victorious people praising God. It was the chaotic noise of revelry. And then he saw it, the golden calf, the center of their worship, the symbol of their profound betrayal. A holy anger burned within him, a righteous fury mirroring God's own. In that moment of intense grief and anger, he threw the tablets to the ground, and they shattered at the foot of the mountain. Jasher emphasizes this act not merely as the loss of a set of laws, but as the visible symbol of a broken covenant. What God had given in perfect holiness was met with impatient, reckless idolatry. The relationship itself was fractured. Standing at the gate of the now defiled camp, Moses issued a powerful challenge, a line drawn in the sand. His voice cut through the noise. "Who is on the Lord's side? Let him come to me." This call was a moment of reckoning, cleaving the camp in 2. The sons of Levi, his own tribe, rallied to him, choosing loyalty to God over the comfort of the crowd. What followed was a swift and terrible judgment. The consequences were severe, a painful but necessary purification of the camp. Repentance came through immense grief, as the people were forced to confront the magnitude of their sin. But judgment was not the final word. Intercession followed. Moses, the faithful mediator, returned to the mountain. He went back into the presence of the God whose covenant had been so flagrantly violated, and he pleaded for the people. His prayer, as recorded, is one of the most selfless acts in all of Scripture. "Oh, this people have committed a great sin. But now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, I pray, blot me out of your book that you have written." Jasher powerfully highlights the heart of a true mediator, one who is willing to stand in the gap, to take the punishment upon himself, to bear the ultimate cost of reconciliation. And in response to this incredible intercession, God relented. He showed mercy, not because the sin was insignificant or because he simply ignored it, But because mercy triumphed through the plea of a righteous mediator, the covenant, though shattered, would be restored. God promised that His presence would continue with them on their journey to the promised land. A new set of tablets would be carved. The journey forward was now possible. But the people would never forget the lesson of the golden calf. The events at Sinai marked the nation of Israel forever. They learned that freedom requires patience. They learned that faith requires waiting on God's timing, not forcing our own. And they learned that true proximity to God demands a trust that goes far beyond what our eyes can see. They had witnessed unimaginable glory on the mountain. In a moment of weakness, they had chosen a cheap substitute. And through it all, they had learned that the God who saves with a mighty hand is also the God who demands absolute loyalty. Their journey would continue, no longer in innocence, but now shaped by divine law, guided by a persistent holy presence, and sustained by an ever-present undeserved mercy. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next episode.